Okay, so today we are discussing in the value chain innovation cluster about innovation IP. So, Rachel, I think that's a topic sometimes a bit difficult for me to understand being a software business because there's very limited ways in which I can protect my software IP and AI IP today versus hardware companies who have to get patents and stuff. But what's your experience been in this area?
Yeah, likewise, I think even when you're in hardware IP, there's always the choice to make around whether it's IP that you're going to protect through keeping it secret in house, or it's IP that you're comfortable letting other people know you've got, but you're going to protect it through patents, or whether it's IP. And sometimes the tricky choice is actually do you then make it freely available because it's an enabler to everybody else to start to adopt your technology as well. And I think it's those kind of like different pots of IP that I see being handled really differently in different types of innovative companies. And there's not one model that works perfectly compared to
Yeah.
everything else. I think it really is a very much, it depends on the company and depends on the situation. But the fundamental bit is that companies that create a lot of innovative IP, that they're actually super aware of what they're doing and mindful and thoughtful about how they're looking after it. That's the bit that makes the difference often, isn't it?
Yeah, and I mean, when I think about, when you talk about software, um, if you change one line of the code, um, your IP changes on that piece of software. Versus in hardware, right? You've got a bit more strict restrictions in place. But even with that, I think what I've seen with my previous experience on is. There's a lot of companies who filed regular patents on different technologies and stuff, but then there are other companies who also find a workaround because you can see what the patents are covering or not covering, and then still be able to come into a competitive space
Yeah.
with that. Um, and obviously the entire process itself is not really neither cheap nor user friendly, that somebody who's not working for a large organization with a lot of lawyers and even just some cash disposal to be available to be able to go and start building this kind of IP. So startups specifically, I think, are definitely people who tend to struggle. How do they get started, right? And what is, as you said, what route should they go after? Really, have you found any support mechanisms, either from the government bodies, the capital centers, or partners or universities, in your experience, which help you uh, basically make the right decision for yourself?
Yes, I mean, have you come across some of those IP audits that you can get through the Innovate UK Edge team? So they're really helpful if you're already on a grant, on the Innovate UK grant. Often you can access the Innovate UK Edge support network, and they've got two stages of funding for IP, and they run it with the IPO, which is also helpful because you get that links into that sort of wider community. The first one is on audit, so they come along, they help you understand how well you're looking after your IP today, and that have you got controls in place? Are you identifying it? Um, are you paying for the right things with your patent strategies and bits like that? And then following that, you can also then apply some follow-on funding, a much bigger pot of money to actually carry out some of the actions that that initial audit spotted for you. And that can be really helpful, for go things like maybe pushing your trademark along or applying for a first patent in a certain area you hadn't thought about before. Um, but equally, one thing I've found is that, like with the value chain innovation cluster, often there are little networks of local businesses who are really supportive of innovative companies. And within there, the patent and the sort of intellectual property community is really active. And I've certainly found in the past that there's some people in there who will give a lot of their time to these early stage or companies that maybe are creating innovation but don't quite know how to deal with it. Just talking through the options about, well, it will cost you this much to try and document that. And then, as you said, you've got the risks other people can see what you're doing. You could protect it in a different way. And they're in the longer term obviously looking to get some really good business as those companies grow and actually kind of engage them on a commercial basis. But I've been really fortunate with the amount of free time people will give you just to try and guide you in their specialist subject and actually keep some of us on the straight and narrow rather than trying to sometimes with IP you kind of go down a route and think I know what I'm doing, and then somebody who actually does know what they're doing talks to you and think, oh no, maybe I don't, maybe I should have had this approach after all. And I
Yeah.
guess with the software side of things, is it also kind of a reflection of the community you work in terms of actually a lot of the software approach is about open source, easy access, the way
Yeah.
that you police yourselves, your code becomes better if you have more eyes on it, for example, is actually a lot of that in that background as hardware is quite protective, don't look inside the cover approach.
It is, and I think with software, the IP production is basically your trade knowledge, your experience, and your approach, and it's basically what's under the hood is hidden in a way. But and for the right reasons, why you can't protect software is all software is derived from different aspects, right? If you look at most of the web applications today, they're similar setups, right? Everything will have a site navigation page, right? Everything, you have a blogging section, stuff like that. um, so it's very difficult to protect that because if you stop that, things cannot be built. So these are like the base aspects. There's also and open source code is again something that's become very popular in industry, and that supports again the acceleration. I mean, to the point that even OpenAI and um, and when they were trying initial stages building these things, you could actually go and download their uh, latest models, be able to run that, and their alternate versions. When if you look at Hugging Face, you can get open model versions of OpenAI's and similar models, run it in your own instance, and build your own thing. And I think it's definitely to support more innovation, and we've seen that happen in terms of the amount of software innovation and the AI innovation coming out is due to that openness today. uh, as businesses, there is certain restrictions that especially startups need to be aware of, that we've been advised as well by some legal teams, which is you need to be aware of within your products if you're building those, is what open source stuff are you using and what the licensing agreements are on that, because some of them could be a little bit vague, and it might be easier when you are in the MVP stage and you're small, but if you scale and you become a unicorn, suddenly you become a target for these claims. So I think it's, as innovators, we often forget. We like to build things, we want to deploy things. We do forget in terms of the protection aspect of it. But it's definitely something you need to make a decision either way. And if nothing else, make it open source, and let other people figure out. And then because at the end of the day, and I found this from reading the book by Kai Fu Lee on AI superpowers on China. Doesn't matter what protection you have on your product, it's a software product or hardware product, people will copy you. So if your product is only protected by the fact of these protections, or your front interface, that is not enough. So anybody can copy your website, your product, match it. It's how deep are you integrated with the customer, and how sticky is that for the customer, that will make the whole difference, because that is difficult to copy.
Yeah,
Very difficult.
definitely. And I think equally in the world of hardware, it's becoming increasingly popular to share IP
Yeah.
in a more free access way. Interesting, often more the bigger companies who have more sway. And I think coming back to the risk profile, isn't it? For a smaller company to share IP, you're allowing potentially people to try and access that market as quickly as you are. With the bigger companies, as you say, they've got those embedded customer relationships. It's less restrictive for them to make their IP open for other people because it doesn't necessarily have that negative impact about their ability to grow because they're already in that large space. And yeah, you're right, it's often a tricky balance to work out which bits of IP actually enable you to access that market. And
Yeah.
often it's about slowing people down, isn't it? It's not necessarily about preventing people from accessing it. It's just about making sure that you can benefit from it first,
Yeah.
and that equally, if you're looking for an exit as a company, that IP retains a level of value
Yeah.
as you kind of go through your different funding rounds. Because
Yeah.
that's the other side of IP, is it has a value that you can attach to it, and for innovative companies going for venture-backed capital funding, that's often a very critical part of it as well.
Absolutely, I think that's something that we've seen firsthand as well in our discussions about how do we protect our IP? What's the safeguards? How do what's stopping somebody replicating the product that you have, and what's gonna keep you in the market like going forward. So I think these are absolutely some critical aspects. But what's also interesting in the last few years, if you were seeing uh, patents being made public by the likes of Tesla, right? On how the battery technologies and things, and that again creates a whole different opportunity and market, that one, for a company to be confident that okay, if you were to go on back 10, 20 years, people are not giving away how they make the engines, or what's making the car faster. And Tesla has definitely reaped the benefit of being the first movers in the battery space, and actually going all in, which then forced everybody else to level up. But then not only that, but opening up some of these patents and stuff to actually create more opportunity and innovation is, again, I think you have to be very confident about your value proposition to be able to do that. But from a world perspective, I think that's great, because that's what starts to allow innovation and innovators to be able to do, and especially small scale,
Yeah.
right? Because if new startups wanted to use that and apply that, and that gets me to my other point. There's so much IP, I believe, that's sitting with universities or research institutes, with student projects and other things, that they might have had an excellent idea, or they built some project which was EU grant funded or innovative grant funded, and once that project finishes, all of these great things are just put on the shelf. Uh, and a lot of duplicacy is trying to happen, and people still trying to do things from scratch where the opportunities already sit. What you've been involved with universities and spinning out startups and stuff. What do you see with regards to this?
Yeah, and you're right. There's just this wealth of information that's out there, and some of that IP could be absolutely cornerstone for companies in certain areas. And so some universities are really good at providing access to that IP. They've got this is the license list. Here's our latest projects. They've got little summaries. Oxford University's got a really quite nice way of, through their innovation and their spin out team, seeing what the different things are that people have been working on in their dissertations or whatever, and saying, look, these are discrete bits of IP that we think may have commercial value. Come talk to us about how you want to do this. Do you want a sort of a license to use? Do you want to just explore it with us in the first instance? Is it you've got an existing company and you want to bring IP into it, or do you want to spin out a completely new company based on this IP? There are definitely academic organisations out there that are very forward thinking about how they can start to flow that out. But even then, you have to go and hunt for that in the first place. So once you get access to the right lists, it's brilliant and it's easy and you've got the relationship there. But just a little search on the internet and you just don't get to where you find those things. And equally through government. So the DSTL, for example, there's a group out there called Plowshare now, and they are all about taking government created IP and trying to push it out into that commercial space. And so and that's really interesting. IP coming out of defence, actually then having that active route into companies, and how can we use that? So for a lot of the time for those things, it's about knowing where that pot of IP lives and how you might go about trying to find out what's on that list in the first place. It won't come up on any freedom to operate searches, will it? Because they're not actually, live, bits of IP at the moment. They're just sometimes just ideas that are sitting in the background, waiting to be used.
Yeah, I think exactly. And to add to what you're saying as well, um, I'd read in one of the books about NASA and a lot of the IP that they generate, right? And what they've done, there's this publicly accessible area that you can actually see all these things that they've built, right, which is just sitting there. And the slimes that are, which are basically used for children play stuff, that came out of one of NASA's experiments, which didn't really get utilized anywhere, and then a company took that, applied it to a completely different area, and made it a huge market. Really, and there's a lot of examples like this, which again feel like, on one hand, we think about, to be innovative, you have to start from scratch, you have to build a new idea. In most cases, there are innovations that have already been, the hard work has already been done, and the people who know the problem in their spaces or their connected spaces, when they look at these solutions, they say, actually, this can actually solve this area's issues massively. And I think bringing that connectivity in place for startups and innovative companies and manufacturers is something that I feel strongly that, as our cluster and a community, that we would really be happy to help and support and figure it out together, for any companies that are interested.
Exactly, because within a company, you've often got just these problem areas, the challenges that you're trying to overcome. And one of the ways that you can start to overcome that is start to see what IP exists in that area already. And through the cluster, to be able to access both sort of the academic IP, the industrial IP, people that can actually start to piece those stories together and work with you to find a solution. It all just comes together to something that actually, it's a very quick way to make progress rather than spending months and months trying to find out what you need to do, only to realize that there was this little bit of information that you could have had a long time ago and it would have made all the difference to you.
Absolutely. I think the other thing that's obviously making all of this more accessible is AI, right? I think uh, instead of people having to go through lists and lists of different IP and different projects and stuff, if it can, they can find which ones are relevant for them as a business, as areas of interest and or areas they want to get into, and that goes back into either the growth areas that the companies see they want to go into, or what capabilities they currently have, which will link into that. That starts to create a type of recommendation, which is very relevant and very specific to that company, and that will accelerate this approach as well.
Yeah. And you use quite AI quite a lot with when you're doing your searches. Have you found
Yeah.
that's really changed over the last little while, that it's actually gone from being very clunky to very smooth and relevant now, or is it still kind of
It,
halfway there?
no, I think it's already solving a problem, and I mean, from the get-go aspect of it, if you think about the Google search, right? The Google for decades has been the go-to for any professional, right? Doesn't matter who you are, especially if you are a software developer. You could have years of experience, you still say, okay, Google it, how to do this, and then go to Stack Overflow and then basically look at that stuff. Um, and but the way the user journey worked on that was, you always get these lists of pages, and nobody would go beyond the 2 pages generally, right, to find the relevant answer. What the AI aspects have made it a lot more smoother is, you get an answer, And obviously the accuracy of that is always in question, but that's been improving more and more, to the point that it can actually give you specific pointed answers, give you specific data. And the likes of Perplexity, for example, what they do is they actually give you answers and cite the sources, which are genuine sources, and the documents in that. So it's becoming a lot more smoother, which means it's quicker for you to get access to knowledge and clarify your thinking with this. And it's only going to improve, right? It's not going to go other way around. And the good part is you do not need to be an expert to use any of these systems. It is literally talking to another person, and specifically with all the new updates that ChatGPT has done with their voice integrations and stuff, you can genuinely, speak and do and to a fro to understand things that are you probably would not even know how to search for, and even if you search for it, you wouldn't know, which what aspects to look at.
Cool. Well, that sounds like it's really going to make a big difference in that, because when you're talking about IP, the information field is so huge. Narrowing it down has always been in the realms of the specialist. So anything that starts to take that out of, just purely being a specialist solution, that you have to get somebody else with knowledge in that space to bring you that sort of, those searches and the identification of IP. If you can start to put that into the hands of you and I, that makes all the difference, doesn't it?
It does, and and that's, I think, one of the critical aspects to enable more innovation going forward, because one, when you look at patent searches and stuff, patent search itself is a huge market, right? You have to pay a good sum of money to get access to certain platforms which does purely patent searches. And even when you do that, you still need to be an expert to decrypt what that patent is saying, which all of that means that there's a huge barrier of entry for people to even start to think about, okay, is there innovation in this space or not? Is this has been done? Because in reality, everybody wants to look, if it's not been done, then they would take that advantage. But it's so difficult today to even get started on journey to understand what is there, right, already, because then I don't have to build on it, right? I could go and get a license for it, for example, or it's not been done, which in which case I would go to it. And hence what you see is that it's only the people who understand this process really go after it and are at it for months before they can actually get protection for the IP or build a new IP around that. And that's changing, and that include hardware designs and things like that, because what's happening more is you're working with the AI, and you'll be doing more and more of that for brainstorm and come up with design ideas and things like that. And the difficulty is, AI has obviously learned it from somewhere, right? But it's very difficult to be able to um, discount, or basically make that as a barrier to say, okay, it's referencing this aspect from this specific area, which means the regulations around that have to be lighter, and then that opens up a lot more open innovation aspect. But the great part of all of that is you can see a lot more IP being created, and I'm hoping somebody comes up with a platform which can, for people like you and me who have ideas or who want to build stuff, but get too overwhelmed with the process, we can actually, work with an AI to say, actually, this is what I want to build. Go and search for if there's something that already exists. If not, or if it does, okay, what alternate can I build from that, and actually do that end-to-end process. And if I could do that, spend fraction of the amount, and let's say get a patent, suddenly I've created something of value that I can either sell or license to other companies. So there's that the protection element is definitely still going to be a key aspect, but democratizing the access and the barrier, I think I definitely see that happening, and that's, I think, a great place for us to be in right now.
Absolutely. Lots of fun.
Good. So I think that's it for today's discussion on everything IP. Hope you guys found it interesting. If you have any follow-on questions or are interested to discuss any of these topics more, reach out to us either on LinkedIn, or if you're a member of our cluster, then ping us on the community.
Brilliant.
Thanks.
Thanks, Nishant.